Going live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're live. We're live, ladies and gentlemen. Happy birthday, Bitcoin. The 12th year since the white paper was released on October 31st. This is pretty exciting. I think I want to give everyone a round of applause for being here this early. I think we'll start off by talking about kind of my story through Bitcoin. Because when I first bought Bitcoin, you can't ever give me credit for being smart enough for recognizing what it was. I was going to get discounted rates on my servers for the work that we were doing in the internet sector. And they're like, oh, you just got to use Bitcoin. I'm like, great. It'll take me an extra hour or two to figure out how to use Bitcoin. Same way it would have in that day taken me to figure out how to use PayPal. So I go through the process, this arduous thing of buying some random internet money. And I buy my first few Bitcoins at $90. Totally by accident, just to save myself money. It offered me real utility in that moment as a means to pay. You've got things like Venmo, PayPal, Western Union, and Bitcoin. This was I think it was 2000. Now you guys are gonna have to excuse me because my mind is kind of blurry here unless we actually go look back specifically at these dates. So I'm just gonna kind of freestyle. It was something like, so around $90, I think it was 2010, 2011. I was smoking a lot of ganja in these days, working at music festivals. It was having all sorts of fun. So it's kind of a little bit of a rainbow in a wash, but somewhere around that time. We could go back and look. We won't do it right now. It's not worth it. And then the next time I bought was at $1,000 when it was like peaking out at its high around 2012, at the end of 2011, middle of 2012 again, rainbowy area of my life. Exact days I don't have that written down. So I buy at the top. This was actually one of my very first lessons in trading because that was the time when I did what most people do wrong when they're actually buying an asset, which is buying it at the top of a peak of its cycle instead of when it's near its bottom in an accumulation range. So I ended up buying again at $900 to $1,000. And this was in Canadian money too. So that maybe was like $700 or $800 American, like right near the top, I think, for whatever it was in American dollars at that time. So I go through my first lesson in investing and trading, which is to be patient and let those hypodermic tops settle down and cool off before entering into any market asset. So actually, we could probably go back and look at that moment here. Now I've got Bitcoin open on the screen here. A bunch of you guys had asked me to kind of go over the first time I had bought Bitcoin and what had happened. So here I can actually price it out in US dollars. Our peak was at 1130. So 2013. Here we go. Thanks for that. Thank God for calendars remembering because my brain is watery when it comes to dates apparently. So I was somewhere around here probably. Between the 800 American and like 900 American is like $1,100, $1,200 Canadian, etc. So this would have been like $1,400 Canadian up here or something. And then I watched it come all the way back down. And this time I bought some ganja, some marijuana stocks. I was playing around with options, puts, calls, just generally in the normal market. And I let all the Bitcoin that I had sit and wait, basically. And then there was this moment here at around $463. And what's really kind of fun is that for those of you that are studying the Wyckoff method with us, you'll recognize something here that became a really important moment in time that I actually didn't recognize. Now, I'm going to go over this because I think it's important to share what I did see that made me re-enter the markets with some pretty heavy fervor. So here we roll around to like April 2016 and then more importantly like March, April 2017 because this is kind of where I started the YouTube channel and where I started the Arcane Bear was over here. So here we had like our classic spring. You can just put it at kind of a wide angle here, and then we started to see this backup phase take place. So when Bitcoin went to $400 to $600 the first time, I recognized it because I actually thought we were doing this. I thought we were making a big cup and handle. And this is why I actually went so heavy into Bitcoin, because I knew from a technical perspective, even a cup and handle at a range like this would produce quite often 100% gain. So I was looking pretty clearly for $3,000 Bitcoin out of this box. So I actually started buying, I started reaccumulating more between 600 and 1200, and I actually kept going. I kept buying up this LPS channel, which is, I think, a significantly important part to remember. So if we're to compare it to today, I'm going to erase some of these green lines I've been drawing in here. Hopefully I can do it smoothly. So this is a live stream in case everyone's watching this later on in the day. The point of this is to, do one. I have, when I first started the Arcane Bear back here in 2017, this kind of area we're looking at, I was not expecting what was about to happen because I had a cup and handle drawn in for this accumulation range like this. Bang. And if we draw our trading range in here, we can see that I actually did the really right thing. I started to lean into my account here as well. I tried selling everything. I sold my motorbike at the time. I sold my drum kit. I even was about to sell my house. People, man, if I had sold my house here, people were offering to buy my house in Bitcoin when it was like $3,000. I didn't do it. I probably should have, but whatever. You learn your lesson. Next time I won't be so attached. I just like growing ayahuasca. I have like this affinity for the fact that I grow ayahuasca here. It is the stupidest thing ever. Don't ever get attached to things, ladies and gentlemen. That's one of the smartest things I can share with you right at this particular moment. So as we started to go up and we break out of this $3,000 area, I started to get much better, much faster at analyzing where we were in the markets. Now, when we got to around October and we started to break out into $6,000, I'm like, wow, this thing could easily hit something like $20,000. And one of the reasons why we did that, I didn't nail the top perfectly, but one of the reasons why I thought that, what was giving me some of that indication, was a breakout actually of this first LPS range here. Sorry, where was this? Yeah, the Fibonacci. Okay, we were at around $6,000. Yeah, right here, and to the bottom. So this is one of the reasons why I thought we were going to go so much higher. When we got into this kind of second and what would be a third wave. So here's like, okay, we've got a wave 1, a wave 2, a wave 3, a wave 4, and then when I went up to the wave 5, I was like, okay, well, let's give a fairly high measurement outside of the box here. And we ended up going all the way to the 4236 because we had seen this in other areas before. We had seen it in the past with not just Bitcoin, but actually Litecoin's price versus the US dollar. Ethereum at that time was exploding, going from dollar, like nothing dollars basically, to hundreds of $340, $1,500. So there's a lot of extra momentum in this ecosystem that made me believe we were going to go a lot higher. So this second and what I thought was a third wave at the time, which ended up, it could be a third wave, but I think we look at LPSs and SOSs differently than I was back here. I'm much more in tune to where the market is at a particular moment. I didn't get lucky here. I did see something, a cup and handle through an accumulation range. I got it right, but I didn't get it right by knowing how right I was. Whereas here, this is a much different time. And we've got a a pretty clear indicator. This is the very start of a bull market. So happy birthday, Bitcoin! Hitting $14,000 on your 12th birthday last night. I'm pretty proud of you there. And we're seeing a lot of strength in this ecosystem in general. So I want to take today to basically do a live stream with you guys and answer any of your questions, go over any topics you might want me to chat about, and I'll spend like an hour or two online with you today and do that. So I'm going to have to roll around. I'm not really good at the live stream. I'm going to double check, make sure everything is working smoothly. So please let me know in the comments, and I'm going to jump into the comment section right now and take a look. Nice. So everyone's happy Halloween. Oh yeah, happy Halloween. I did bring my Halloween hat, just in case I thought I would need to dress up for my jungle self. This is what I look like when I'm in the jungle, by the way. It's always smart to wear a hat when you're walking through. You've got these caterpillars that are all poisonous in the jungle. You touch them, they like burn your skin. You definitely don't want to be walking around without a hat in the jungle. Anyways, that's my Halloween costume, is what I look like in the jungle, effectively. What is the Wyckoff method? Great question. We'll fill that in. What about the gap? Will it be closed? Bull sneaks into the bear den chat and something about ETH. You can sell it for hex. Yeah, I don't see. Look, guys. I never joined cults about anything. I'm fascinated by technology in general. Okay, so here FN Base is saying something nice. The white paper came out today, but I think the first block happened January 9th. Great. Perfect. I believe I said in the beginning it was for the birthday of the white paper. But anyways, you can double check me on that one. Let's see, short-term pullback for Bitcoin, and then can we do something? I saw profit targets. Okay, and actually, can we do some end of the cycle profit targets? Okay, so great. There's a bunch of questions. I'll try to roll over a few of those and make something valuable of the whole sentiment there, because it's mostly about crypto, obviously. And then where are we at in the market? So we'll start from there. Now, let's go to the 4-hour. If you're a fan of this channel, you already know why we start in the daily time frame like that, just to get a nice perspective of how long it's taken to get here from where we started this story. And then we're going to look at this nice SOS. Okay, here we see a beautiful rising gradient accumulation. This backup phase was super sexy and very powerful. Now we have to remember that considering how big Bitcoin is, this is actually a very powerful move of a 23% in a single go. Actually, even further if you count from the bottom of this regression line here, which is actually, again, extends even further back to the lower areas of our spring here effectively. So I actually think if you open up the RSI here, you can see a very specific pattern that's occurring, which is known as bearish divergence. Now, again, we're not trying to predict a price movement right now. We're just trying to go over some of the technical things that are kind of obvious at this particular moment, because I do believe the SOS actually goes a little higher before coming back down to test the regression line. So I suspect that if you are watching, you will see this green line come up on the screen, and let's make sure, oh no, hold on, let's go back to this. Yeah, there we go. So we've got our rising gradient bottom for our first accumulation, and then we saw the SOS starting to take place, which is right here. So right now we have a bit of a bearish divergence where we have a rising price structure and a falling RSI. Rising price, falling RSI. The reason that's important is because it goes alongside what I believe is going to happen in terms of our conjecture for market momentum. So we saw an accumulation pattern, and then what I've noticed is in these smaller market cycles, you have like an accumulation pattern, an up, a reaccumulation, and then finally a distribution. So it's kind of like a 3-part move that we're looking for right now, and I believe we're in the second part of the move right now, which is going to actually build some type of reaccumulation. Now, that trading range is likely going to come down and actually form sideways because Bitcoin is a big asset right now. Like, we have to remember there's lots of big people getting into it, so we might see it something like this. Now, whether or not it takes this sideways channel or it makes another rising gradient bottom, again, if it makes a rising gradient bottom trading range right here, this is going to be, that's a hugely powerful motive and incentive to be paying very close attention to Bitcoin. Now, one of the things I wanted to go over in some of our future videos, which is about leverage trading. So in 2017, I was selling all my stuff. I sold my motorbike, and I sold a bunch of stuff to have more capital. One of the powerful aspects of leverage, don't use it if you don't know what you're doing, or margin trading, is that you can basically borrow money against the collateral that you have in your account. Had I known that then, I would have just done that, because there was no need for me to sell like an extra $5,000 or $10,000 when I could have just gone 2x, right? Not even 2x. So that's a very valuable lesson that I think I bring into this bull market that I didn't have before, that allows for a lot of extra profitability if you know how to play these things. So again, a little bit of bearish divergence right now. We're at a rising price, falling RSI. And again, I do believe that we are going to see a move into a new trading range to create this kind of accumulation pattern, reaccumulation, and then final distribution, which will be the whole cycle of what we're going to call the SOS. So if I get rid of the bearish divergence conversation and we look at it from, again, a bigger perspective, I think is one of the most important parts here. We see that I've got a few regression lines drawn out. The closest ones back from phase B come as high as $17,000 effectively. Now, before that, the automatic rally, you're talking about previous highs and much higher, so we'll get into speculation about price height over time, I guess, as well. But more importantly, right now, let's just focus on the intermediary time frame. So we had this accumulation. I think we're going to have a reaccumulation and then a final breakout top. And then we're going to see our accumulation, basically. And our accumulation may actually ride around here, something between like 17,000 and 13,000 before it does boom. So we see something very similar to this back in 2017, which is this multi-structure SOS and LPS phase that comes out of the box. So I'm just going to draw this in, and if you guys are studying, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So here we had an SOS and then the backup phase for Bitcoin, and then we had another SOS and another backup LPS. So you can just call these all LPS. So SOS, LPS, SOS, LPS. They don't have to be called backups, although I think the first one generally tends to dip a bit lower than because it's really testing the finalization of the supply here. So I suspect if we carry that same mentality into the future, not that it will be identical, but that it will have some sort of similarity, we're actually going to see a nice big SOS. Maybe, again, I think it may come as high as 17,000, and then build a new accumulation range somewhere between here and maybe come down and touch the backup phase. I don't know. I don't know why it would do that. We're in a very strong hand situation right now, it seems like, before, again, making the next SOS and then final LPS at like 1920, and then going out for a much bigger run. So if we kind of speculate on what the future might look like for just Bitcoin, because guys, I probably should repeat this more often so everybody knows, Bitcoin is the money in this ecosystem. The reason why I always chart against Bitcoin's price, aside from like maybe Ethereum, is because this is the money is in this ecosystem. If I don't chart in Bitcoin, and even if I'm net positive in the US dollar, I could be net negative on my Bitcoin position, and that to me is unacceptable. So Bitcoin is the money in this ecosystem. I think it's a very important thing for me to like highlight, because it means that long term, I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist, but ultimately I believe if you're going to move in and out of investments or projects, Bitcoin's the thing that allows us to do that on a stable layer of collateral. Everything else is kind of a tertiary fundamental of, well, we need to rebuild the rest of the financial system, which is also ridiculously valuable. We have to remember Amazon is worth trillions of dollars in equity movement or something like this. So again, let's go into a further speculation, and I'm just going to draw up I don't think it's going to be as strong, but let's go from what would be an equivalent of a first SOS based off what it did last time. And we have, and again, to the top of the 4236, you're looking at something like $120,000 to $150,000 would be my guess. That's just my guess, right? There's a few ways we could look at how high it could go. There's reason, again, this is what we're looking for, is something effectively like this, right? Where you've got this long accumulation that we've been in, it comes up, it does one final reaccumulation, and then bam, has a massive distribution top before it comes back down, boom, boom, and then actually forms a new reaccumulation area over the next few years through 2025, something like this. Now, it could go much higher and come down less, right? We saw it go from 1,000 to 20,000 back down to 3,000, right? So you're talking about basically a third of the value in either of these directions. And again, we can't predict based off previous models, but we can at least make a round assumption that it's probably going to go higher than $50,000, and it's probably going to go less than like $350,000, but it could go that high. When it was at 3,000, I was just guessing, well, maybe it could go that high. I think that this time it's going to move slower. I think it's going to be more stable. And I think the volatility to the upside is actually going to decrease because of the more sophisticated quantitative buying processes that are taking place in this ecosystem. So we'll get to see what that means, but that's my current kind of outlook and conjecture. I think we're in the very, very beginning of the bull market, very effective to where I was when I thought we were when I was right, we were in a giant cup and handle of accumulation. Like, again, for those of you that study the Wyckoff method, do I have the PDFs open right now? Yeah, I could go to them here in the private Arcane Bear group. If you haven't joined yet, join, because it's risk-free. If you're not happy, you'll get a refund. Just ask us, although we don't have that happen very often. So I'm going to go here to educational materials, and I want to go to the accumulation, spotting a trade in the wild here. We're going to, I already have this downloaded. I'm 100% positive, but we'll just go through the process. So this is a document that the private bear group gets. The goal of this, what I'm about to do right now, is just kind of share Okay, well, obviously there's the market cycle, accumulation, distribution. That's what we were just kind of going through. And more importantly, I wanted to look at, let's see here, we'll go through one of our educational material. Yeah, see, here's the cup and handle on the schematics of accumulation that I thought we were, I mean, this is what I saw when Bitcoin was doing its thing back in between 2013 and 2017, effectively. I did not yet understand accumulation, but I got this part right, which was basically, I got lucky. I got lucky. And a lot of things in life are made of luck. So I recognize that and I'm okay with it. I got lucky from something I saw here. But now we can see a much clearer sign of strength in what we're studying. And now that I know that these SOSs and LPSs come back down, it's likely going to give you a few points before that real kind of hyperbolic move gets in here. Now, this is very, very exciting because, again, I'll make some further conjecture, right? In the last bunch of days, we've seen the VIX spike. We've got the elections right around the corner. And normally in a time of volatility, because Bitcoin is like considered a risky asset, or at least it was, you have a 46% spike in the VIX over the last, let's say, 16 days since the 20th of October. And then in Bitcoin, you have, let's see, the 20th of October, boom, like this, you actually have a 24% price increase. So if we go down here again, and we've talked about this in our previous show, I just want to make a larger conjecture here. Around the 20th of October, an 8% drop in the S&P 500. Well, hot damn, more volatility, right? Drop in the tech sector through that volatility, and Bitcoin's price is increasing. That's one very, very, very clear sign that we have a run out of supply and the demand is increasing. This is a very, very valuable moment to be in the markets, to be well studied, and to know how to use the tools that are at hand. Now, big questions from people are like, well, what is Ethereum going to do, or what's Link going to do? So I can use Link as conjecture actually to the past. Now I'm going to use Link versus Bitcoin here for this because Link, I don't believe, is necessarily done its buying climax. So I believe that there's another stage or two here that's probably going to disrupt a little of what we think is like an easy way to play, right? I think Link is probably going to make a final wave up during Bitcoin's cycle here before coming down for a much longer, larger reaccumulation range. As you can see, something very similar to Bitcoin's happened. You had the first few LPSs and SOSs, ridiculous, and say it goes to like $36 or something from here again, which is a huge move based off this. But again, what we're looking at is that this accumulation range started to break up. It went up multiple new regression lines and formed into a parabolic move. Now, if Link isn't done, and this is where the conjecture comes into play, or if it is done, this was the buying climax, you actually come back a lot lower. Now, we can't predict the markets, but if I start to look at the US dollar, and one of the things, I normally don't chart against US dollars, but in Ethereum, it's become prevalent. And I think also in Link, it seems to be showing some validity. Now, we can chart in Bitcoin, and we actually see a flat trading range come, not a rising gradient bottom. And I think that this is important too, because I'm not the only one that's measuring my portfolio in Bitcoin's price, because that's our money. So I think we're actually seeing a new trading range form here for Link, and will be a reaccumulation range for like a final wave blowout before we see a reaccumulation after Bitcoin probably starts to peak out. Everyone will ditch because they'll just be day over day gains that feel like insanity, like we had in 2017. And it was insanity. So be prepared for that when it starts to happen, so you can recognize it, because it's to your advantage to be able to recognize when that starts to happen. So with Link here, I actually think that the US dollar chart is somewhat relevant too, because of all the new forms of leverage and margin trading that's come out. So here we can see what's potentially turned into a rising gradient bottom on the US dollar chart and just a regular accumulation range on the Bitcoin chart. I think on the US dollar chart here, it looks a little easier because we've actually had the backup phase. Here's the SOS, and this final SOS and LPS will kind of signal the next move into a bull market. How high is it going to go? Not as high as it has gone, because it's already really high from where it was back in 2017. So again, if we look here and we just kind of create that, let's actually we'll kind of redraw it on. We'll redraw it on this point. Here you can see trading range. Actually, let's just draw it up here. Your kind of first trading range, your breakout, your SOS, your LPS, SOS, LPS, and then these kind of final breaks up. Now, the chart is actually much clearer in Bitcoin in those early days, and I have it drawn up here. So I think it's important to, once the token gets big enough, if they're offering 10x leverage in the stable coins, etc., we are getting some relevant data, but obviously, like with Binance token, very, very clear return to the regression line right now. A big SOS. We even tried to get out of that SOS twice. That's why I was like, I was a little late to fully exit this trade. I exited right in the last part of this breakdown. But nonetheless, it formed a very beautiful accumulation range versus Bitcoin's price, whereas Binance versus the US dollar is just, it doesn't make any visible sense in terms of pattern plays. So it was not as valuable to me in terms of data. Whereas once they've gotten big enough, like Ethereum and Link have really become market indicators and leaders in this space, like, oh, they're going to be here for a while. Like, okay, yeah, this Bitcoin's our money, but there's some obviously very real attributes of using blockchain or digital ledger technology and these ecosystems for other reasons than just money. And I think that's important to keep in mind too. So even though Link seems to be hitting its reaccumulation, Ethereum is in maybe not as a powerful version of reaccumulation. So I don't have as much going into these trades as I do into the Bitcoin's final LPS after the SOS, because I think that's the most. After all this study, I think that one of the most important places to get in and to really lean into your longs is here, what we had on Ethereum, which was just before the breakout, and here where we had on Bitcoin, which is just before the breakout, somewhere between 10,000 and 10,200 for like the start of the long position, which is what I did for both Ethereum and Bitcoin. Now, I'm going to really lean into this on the back of the SOS, on the back of the final LPS or backup, whatever you'd like to call it, somewhere in this. And even if it's an entirely new trading range that takes place between here and March, etc. So I do kind of suspect that the SOS moves positively through all the market turmoil because it's acting as a stability during all the volatility, which is in itself, again, kind of madness. But again, it proves our point that there is more demand than there is supply now. So we're going to see something exciting come out of Bitcoin. So what does that mean for everything else? Well, in 2017, Bitcoin and the rest of the space kind of grew together, but you had exponential gains, right? Like let's take Fetch as an example from the spring here. So when we first started kind of making some of these Wyckoff trades, not anywhere near as confident about them before, there's one lesson I wish I would have learned ahead of time. So let's go like a retrospective analysis. I was only exiting like 30 to 40% of my positions up here. Now the goal is to exit 90 to 100% of positions on the end of an SOS, unless it's Bitcoin, because again, I'm quite confident about Bitcoin. I've been in here long enough. These other ones here are interesting because from the spring in Fetch to the top of the SOS, you had a 598% gain versus Bitcoin's price. So you could have made trades that were in the multiples of 100 if you were doing something with leverage here, right? And that to me is crazy. Now these are smaller cap coins. You can't do that much with that much money without moving the market, etc. So obviously it's easier to say make $100,000 off Bitcoin using $10,000 in equity on one of its moves versus let's say $1 million actually, because $1 million in Fetch, you'll move the market, like guarantee. It's only a $54 million market cap. You'll see your footprint as comp man in this game. Whereas with Bitcoin, if you're moving $100,000, $1 million around, you're not going to move the price. You're not big enough in the comp man game. We're talking about hundreds of millions of billions of dollars moving through an ecosystem on a daily basis potentially. So no. But in something like Fetch, you would move the market, but you also had these incredible gains that were possible because of leverage and the fact that you're getting a 6x gain versus Bitcoin's price, even while Bitcoin was going up that 100%. So we actually saw something very similar where Bitcoin and the rest of the altcoin space would kind of breathe together. Right, this SOS phase, it seemed like everything waited and this started to find its way into Bitcoin, moved all into Bitcoin. So I think that that's important. Again, this is why I chart usually against Bitcoin, again, because it's my money. So I hope that was a helpful broad spectrum overview for just the future of the way things are looking and the kind of mistake, like, because I definitely made a mistake by not exiting 70 to 90% or even 100% of these trades. Now there's a few, again, I made great gains. I'm still up on a bunch of these. Some of them got stopped out, like BAT. I had a great 50% gain, and then I got stopped out like on the final regression line at not a huge loss. Yeah, I basically stopped out at what I was willing to lose on that trade. So I've told you guys a few times that with leverage, the way I look at it is only play with what you're willing to lose. Not that you should be willing to lose something, but more like that's the stop loss. So what I had done here on BAT is I was playing with leverage. So I put $1,000 in to be able to buy $10,000 worth of BAT. So I actually made a really great gain here and then only closed 20 to 30% of the position. So I think I overall ended up in a slight profit by like 7%, even though the price just got absolutely basically annihilated, because I had made profits from the first LPS into this SOS. But it became very clear to me after this that I always want to exit out of the SOS, reassess the markets, because we were following some of these while Bitcoin was being a little slow, we'll say, and you were seeing from LPS to SOS on Tron 130%. On Omisego, you saw something very similar from the SOS, 280%. So I was getting euphoric about some of these SOSs in their final stages. And again, this is why we need to pay such close attention to Bitcoin now, is because that's what it's doing. Now its relationship again with my strategy here is just that, okay, out of every SOS that you get, you want to be pretty much 90 to 100% out of your position, even though there's 360% over top of Bitcoin's price available in some of these. Once Bitcoin starts to move, Bitcoin's our money, and everybody just sits back in the money seat until the time changes. When, look, we're getting close to the bottom of the regression lines. BAT's been absolutely destroyed. And here's one of the things I think about, I wanted to go over too, because this is actually the perfect kind of time to go over like a retrospective analysis of what I did wrong in this SOS phase, because these are new to me, knowing how well this works. Whereas when I got in Bitcoin at the cup and handle in what was it again? 2006, is that you had a lot of retail traders in here that had been able to get BAT from like browsing on their web browser, and they've been saving it, and you've got 10x leverage, and that at this point here in the kind of like ultimate of pandemonium in the pandemic aspect, there was none of the retail traders really were even capable of selling at this spring. So this is all excess supply, effectively. I don't think that this has invalidated the long-term potential, but I think what it does recommend is that you always close back into Bitcoin, always chart against Bitcoin. And again, with leverage, I'll explain myself here. I was only entering into positions that I was okay with losing, as like that's my stop loss for this play. So I'll explain it like this, right? If I've got $100 and I buy into one position at spot price and it goes up 10%, I've made $10. But I can risk only $10. I can buy $100 worth of a position at 10x, and if it goes up 10%, I've made $10 while only risking $10. Right? Same thing with 100. I could risk $100, put $1,000 on the table, it goes up 10%. I've made $100. I've doubled my money effectively, right? But the downside is if it goes down 10%, that $100 is gone, or that $1,000, whatever, that $10,000, whatever equity you want to put on the table to increase your lot size. So I'm using quite often a stop loss as my play position in the leverage of the account. So you're not ever trading with massive amounts of your account. It's not like, oh, this is all my portfolio on the table at once. This is just aspects. And use a stop loss. Just always use a stop loss is a smart idea. But I was giving these are volatile assets. I was okay, I'll risk this much to make this much. If it closes out, I lose that much. It's fine because of the risk to reward relationship on some of these plays. So it's really about a game of patience and numbers to some degree. So retrospectively, I always exit the SOS now. at like the majority of the position. And then I just find something else to do with my time. And I actually may just start taking this time off. Anytime I see an SOS, I'm just going to close out my position and then come back at the end of the SOS. Now, especially because I could just enter into Bitcoin, it would save me so much time. I would be doing nothing the last few months and made even more money to some degree. Not made more, but I wouldn't have been as stressed out. Let's say that. Yeah. I wouldn't have been like as annoyed with some of the market, which is okay. Just time to go long, time to go short, and a time to go fishing or take mushrooms or something like that. So now that Bitcoin is doing its SOS, quite exciting. Started to build my long positions. I mentioned multiple times that I would be doing this in the accumulation range of this phase, the same way we did with Ethereum. Again, might go as high as $17,000, create a new trading range before finally starting new SOSs and LPSs. And in each of these LPSs, I'm probably going to start to finalize my long positions over the next 6 months into springtime. So yeah, that's that. Hope that was helpful. And let's take a look at one or two more thoughts and questions as we're rolling up on almost an hour or something. Hour-long live stream for Bitcoin's white paper's birthday. So we'll give you my face back so I can look at some of the thoughts or questions you guys have maybe. Let's see here. Okay, so yes, we're live. Oh yeah, DJ Wisdom says many were staking BAT in the DeFi run. Yeah, there's a lot that was locked up there. Great point. Great point. I agree. I agree with this point. Where can you use leverage? It depends. You've got things like Binance, FTX. There's a bunch, I would assume. It probably really depends on what jurisdiction you're living in. That's what I would say. Next 2 weeks, more pain for alts. Yeah, I think the entire SOS phase is probably going to be painful for the entire altcoin sector. Mostly because everyone's going to get scared that Bitcoin's just going to all of a sudden go to $100,000 tomorrow because it started. And they're going to move in and out of positions. It'll shake out the final weak hands. So again, timing here in the markets is so important. So I don't think we're necessarily at an ultimate bottom yet, but we're starting to see some bottoms form, which is important, right? We're seeing pretty clear, I think, reaccumulation in Ethereum starting to form. So that's important as well. It's important to keep your eyes on the big players. It's like, don't ever not look at the big players and think, oh yeah, I've got this figured out. No, the big players just going to remain the big players. Like, put money on that. Let's see, $1 million Bitcoin end of year according to John McAfee. Well, yeah, what year is the major question there? Maybe out into the future quite a bit, but just by the understanding of estimates of time, I would suspect a ways out from now. We'll start to be able to measure as this really starts to take place. Nice. Or something. How much will the Spark token start at, do people think? I have no idea what that is. Probably I would not even touch that kind of stuff until things have formed. I have screen sharing off. What? No. I didn't do that whole thing with screen sharing off, did I? I hope I didn't. Maybe I did. Maybe I did do that whole thing with the screen sharing off. That would be funny. That would be silly of me, but it probably wouldn't be the first time I did something ridiculously silly. The fact that we have like a live streaming camera and this stuff all works in the middle of the jungle is pretty fascinating to me at all. So hopefully I didn't do that. I'll tell you what, I'll just go like this. That way you guys can see the screen that I'm using when I'm talking to you guys. Nah, just at the start. Okay, good. It wasn't that whole time. Do you see the DeFi projects coming back, holding a bag of them and wondering if I'm going to be above water ever again? So this is the reason why you always sell into profits. I didn't touch, and I'm not going to touch the DeFi space until I see some very obvious reaccumulation come into place. There are some that I think will do well. Yeah, I think the DeFi sector is going to be quite big. I think it's undervalued right now at where it's at. But let's take a look at Wi-Fi, for example. So for instance, it's done, and then from there I basically try to reassess where my position is, judging on the character of each new moment effectively, because otherwise you're going to enter too early. Like I saw people talking about buying into here, and we made a little bit of conjecture in the private bear den about Wi-Fi making this kind of falling wedge type situation here, but it didn't break. It broke to the bottom of that, right? So again, still a very, very bearish position versus Bitcoin. I don't know what value Wi-Fi has personally at all. One of the things I do like is that it brought a conceptual value to the table, but this is open source technology. Who gives it about the token? The tokens are worthless. Like, I mean, in some degree or another, look, I can argue that Bitcoin is just as much a meme coin as Dogecoin. Like this technology is open source, so it's much more about the community's decision than it is about, oh, this is the thing. People mass hallucinate value in every way, shape, and form. That's why art can be worth so much. That's why the paper dollar still has any value. So I'm not going to argue that Bitcoin's like the thing, but what I like, what it will always ring true, is that it's the conceptual aspect of what this brings to the table that's the most valuable. As soon as the community chooses which one they want to use, well, that's one that becomes the most valuable, because that's the one everyone's agreeing to use. And right now, that's Bitcoin for our money. So it's Bitcoin. A pretty simple answer. Not a cash, a money. Very different thing. Currency and money are very fucking things. And on the bright side, people that are smart enough to recognize that, and know that money is more valuable than currency, because you need more currency because there's more people. There's more value being created by businesses. You need more liquidity and capital moving through the markets. You can't just have one indivisible, like finitely divisible money. That's a different kind of course of nature. Currency is supposed to be a bit more not finite. You might need more of it depending on how many more people or more new great ideas is added to the ecosystem. The point is, we've landed in a very bad system of debt that doesn't work for anybody, and it probably doesn't cost anything to produce any of the things that we're making anymore, and we probably shouldn't be charging anyone anything for any of this crap, because we could probably make it all for pretty much motherfucking free a few years down the road. But that's an entirely different perspective of where I think we're headed, because the world of technology is deflationary by such a huge standpoint that it's really difficult to keep up with what that means. Like, everything should become inevitably free almost to a fairly high degree. What if you had like an infinite energy device on an airplane? You had this airplane that had like almost no moving hard parts, very little maintenance or upkeep, no fuel that you had to pay for. Flight costs would they would plummet, right? You could get on, you'd have like a first class seat for nothing, because it would cost nothing to fly the plane. They'd have no pilots. They become all autonomous, this type of thing. That's probably not too far off in our future. And until we really recognize that, how much money becomes a really crazy question. I know a lot of people have a shit ton of money. You know what kind of vehicles they buy? They buy Toyotas, because they're like the most reliable vehicle. Anyways, that's a different conversation. It depends, right? You have some people that have a little bit of wealth, and they act and dress and talk and walk like they've got a ridiculous amount of it. And then if you know people that have made hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, they look like kind of weird people sitting in tea lounges with dirty fucking shirts, half-assed fucking freaking suits that don't fit properly. They don't want to be recognized as wealthy. There's a very big difference in the two of them and the way they present themselves. Some, not always the case, but most of the time, that's the way I've seen it, because there's a balance between, what's actually valuable to an individual is your appreciation of wealth, not so much what the wealth. They probably still, You'll see them on a private yacht somewhere for like a vacation time with the family, or for like an event with the business that they've run or something. But on their own accord, they're usually quite happy reading books, and they're like, great, I've got a spot to sit in a place where I can read my book. I'm happy. So they dress accordingly. Anyways, where was the long-stemmed conjecture? Oh yeah, DeFi. I do believe DeFi has a really beautiful future ahead of it. But right now, Bitcoin is the money. So the DeFi sector is built around the money. It's like a suit for the money. It's a place where you can earn interest, and you can have liquidity pools and venture capital funds, and you can make digital collectibles, and you can trade it in and out of the ecosystem through decentralized automated market makers. It's a fascinating thing that's taken place right now. It's really mind-boggling. So I do believe the DeFi space comes back, but I'm not going to touch it until I see it hit a bottom. Right? Like we saw a lot of energy out of Ren, but even Ren it's coming down. It's forming like a pretty hard bottom. So I don't want to touch it until I see a very, very clear and obvious change of character in basically the rest of the sector, which we haven't seen yet, because I believe it's going to come when Bitcoin makes its first SOS. You're going to see some of the real strong leaders step out from this like we had we're looking at Ren right now. We 115% run up, and then right back down to that position pretty much as well. So it's important, again, to keep that long-term perspective. So we'll go back, we'll take a look at a few more guys' thoughts, questions, and then we're going to finish that one off for the day. Does OMG have a future? See, I don't trade by asking questions like, do things have a future? I look for a technical analysis. I make that trade, and then I exit that trade. If I've done well in that trade, I will leave a little bit on the table because I don't know what has a future. But other than that, I'm not going to try to answer it because I don't know. This Peace Soup says, the richest guy where I live looks like a tramp sometimes. Guy's a billionaire. Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, so one of my mentors, as a side conjecture story, but one of my mentors started the company called Silk Almond Milk, and they were doing like $9 billion a year in revenue selling fucking water and almonds. Like, guy was a gangster. He's one of my best friends. I'm actually going to visit him tomorrow. We have like little days where we hang out and drink tea and stare at the ocean and stuff like this. But when he first came over to my house, I was like having a dinner party. He's got a white shirt on and a bag around his neck. It's like a dirty white shirt. We live in the jungle, right? And I'm like, Steve, what's with this bag around your neck? He's like, this is my bag, right? So I had to two expletives. This is my bag. And I'm like, what's a fuck bag? He's like, oh, every time I go, oh shit. Well, what, screw it. He's like, every time I go, oh shit, fuck. He's like, everything I need is in the bag. He's like, I got my keys. I got my credit cards. They're usually quite eclectic characters, and the reason why they are that way is because once you get to a point where you have that much money, well, what does it do? It doesn't change much anymore. Like, well, great, I could buy new everything every day, so I'm happy. I got my bamboo shirt, and I've got my bamboo bag. Anyways, I love Steve. Steve, you're a great man. Thank you for being such a great friend. Anyways, that's a total side point. Okay, a few more thoughts and questions, and then we'll end this episode off for the day. How do you feel about ADAs in its backup phase? And how do you minimize loss through funding rates when holding a long trade? How do you minimize loss? Make a trade that's worth holding. Yeah, that's how I would. Yeah, if you're going to trade $10, it's not really worth the trade execution itself. You would want to put enough on the line so it's actually worth it. Nice. And then Sarah Moret says, I once worked for a Russian billionaire, and he looked like a plaster painter with holes in his jeans. Yeah, there's something about like the ultra wealthy and the people that are like just starting to make wealth, because the people that have ultra wealth, they're generally not driven by money. They're driven by the thing that they're doing, so they make a lot more money. So it's not like the money was never the result, was never the goal for what they were doing. It was the work that they were ultimately fascinated by, and that's what kept them going. So when they got to the place where they're ultimately quite wealthy and successful, it didn't change the character of who they were. They were quite, and not only that, they probably less likely wanted to be identified as someone that you could be like, oh, look at that guy's got a nice watch or some kind of thing. You learn how to blend in, like a zebra. As a unicorn, you're like, no, I'm a zebra. I swear to God, motherfucker. Anyways, we're going to leave it at this today. The question about ADA, maybe I'll start doing more dedicated videos just to try to pound through them and look at analysis on multiple tokens. It's just hard. I'm really only following 1 or 2 trades at a time, and I don't have much time to look at anything else because I only want to be able to profit and capitalize off that like focused mentality of where I'm going. So it's not always that easy way to go. I hate the saying is if you have to ask the price, you can't afford it. It's so stupid. Wealthy person I know watches their money like a hawk. Yeah, this is the other thing too. Once I guess it depends on how you've made your money, and how easily you think you could lose it. Like they're usually, once you're old enough to have made that much, like sometimes people get really, let's say, lucky when they're younger, and they make an extraordinary amount of wealth in their early days. That luck does not go unnoticed by the older people. The older you are, the more likely you are to recognize that the fact that you're even fucking alive still is hugely due to luck and circumstance of events. And a lot of things you have no control over whatsoever. So the people that recognize that luck, they're often more frugal because to them, they realize that any given moment, something could massively change in any given way, shape, or form. So they live a life of modesty. And it also generally equates to more happiness. Again, if you can sit down, read a book anywhere, and you're just happy because you're reading your book, you're not like, oh, I need to be in a Ferrari driving down this particular place to go to a party. If you're just happy reading your book, then ultimately you've achieved success faster than the person who's still like trying to get something that's not all that valuable. Anyway, it's a different story. We'll leave it at that. Thank you guys all. Happy Halloween. Happy birthday to Bitcoin's white paper and the fundamental change in technology, the way we recognize it. Really excited to be a part of this with all of you guys. Subscribe if you like the channel. Subscribe if you don't like the channel so that you can come here and have someone to try to heckle. Give us a thumbs up if you like the content. Give us a thumbs down if you don't. It's either way. I'm just happy that you have something to express. Yep. This has been a wild 2020, ladies and gentlemen. This is the very beginning of a bull market. So suit up, ride on, and I wish you guys all the best for basically we're starting a new year. Like we're really close to a new year already. This is it. And I hope you enjoy like the other side of the room while we feel like I'm building the podcast section over here. So the wall's going to be all nice and kind of like blue tinted wood. Have some stuff hanging on the wall again like before. And we'll have the new podcast section on the other side of where this screen is at the moment. So I'll have the new room ready. So thank you guys again for the support. And have a lot of fun with all these things. And great questions, great thoughts today. And live stream. YouTube doesn't like live streaming the way it used to. I'm glad everything worked mostly well. I appreciate that. And for anyone that watched it this long after the live stream, you're a champion because it was just it's just me ranting, and I appreciate that you would listen to me rant for so long and give me so much attention. I appreciate the fact that I get anyone's attention for sharing what I have to share. It means a lot when you live out in the absolute middle of the jungle. You're like, dude, how far can we go with this? It doesn't matter. Anyways, see you on the other side next episode. Doesn't last, and then hold on, I could even do this because it doesn't matter.